stick to your own thing. Like don't follow the trends. Like do what feels right for you, and let the people follow you.
All right, everybody, welcome to the show. I'm here with guitarist from the band KIX, Brian Forsythe. He's also a guitarist for the band Rhino Bucket. It's a great pleasure to have him. Welcome to the show, Brian.
Good to be here.
How you doing, Brian? How are things looking out there? Where are you coming out of at the moment? First, we were talking a little bit before, but let the audience know where you're coming out of.
I live in Nashville. I've been out here for like 3 years, so
Nice.
starting to get used to it.
What brought you to Nashville? All I hear is that Nashville is a place where rock and roll thrives and continues to thrive more than anywhere else in the nation.
Yes, not only rock and roll, but pretty much every kind of music. I mean, yeah, that was like the final decision maker was the music scene. Um, I was living out in LA for like 26 years. So I love LA and I love the weather out there, but it got so expensive and I had to make a move, and I needed a new place to live, and I didn't want to just go pay rent somewhere. So I decided to buy a house. And when I started looking here in around Nashville, I realized how much more affordable it was in this area. So, that was the first motivation. And then the music scene on top of it was the final decision maker.
It doesn't even seem like a viable option or even a sensible one to even buy a place in LA. You get a place for the same price anywhere else. You got a ranch, you got a palace.
That's true. In fact, that's what I figured out how much my budget was, and houses that I could afford, I didn't want. It was like, I don't want that. So then I started looking here, and it was like, oh, I can get that. So yeah, it was a no-brainer.
Hey man, I'm sure everybody would have made the same decision. So 3 years, not too long before this whole indoor party we've been having, where everybody's quarantined.
Right. In fact, I had just started, getting up and running and discovering like cool places to go, and then everything shut down. So now I've got to sort of go back out there because I haven't been. I sort of got used to being home,
Yeah,
which
right.
actually is not a bad thing, especially having a new house. It gave me a chance to just sort of settle in and get used to being here. So.
Hell yeah! If there's ever a time you want to be quarantined, it's in a new place. I bet a lot of people just got tired of the old and same. So, not that there's anything wrong with that, but the fact that you got a new house, hey, let's decorate the place. Let's really get to know the place. I'm sure you feel like you've lived there longer than 3 years because you've been there maybe more than you would have normally.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah.
Now, Brian, the reason we have you here today is because you are the guitarist for the legendary rock group KIX. Now, you guys have recently come up more even now up into the surface. Really, the popularity never went away. But you guys, when did KIX originally get started?
Wow. We first got together, our first rehearsal. It was actually pre-KIX. It was was to become KIX. We got together in December 1977 for the first time.
1977, and in 2022, you guys are still planning tours, planning shows.
I know, isn't that weird?
It's awesome. I think it's awesome, and it's a testament to the belief that anybody who wants to start a group. You never know where it's going to go. Did you guys project this kind of longevity and success when you started this in 1977?
No, because at that point I'd been through a bunch of different bands, from high school on, and bands don't last that long. There's always something that goes wrong somewhere along the way, or you just, or you can't get work, or, there's always obstacles, and things just sort of, one member will get disillusioned and they'll leave, and then the whole band kind of falls apart. So when we did this, the one thing that was different about this situation though was Donnie Purnell, the original bass player and the main songwriter for all those years in the 80s. He was he was the guy that put the thing together. And I remember him saying, you know, we're going to try to entice me to the project. He goes, yeah, we're going to write original songs and get a record deal. And up until that point, I had just been playing in like top 40 bands, you know, just playing cover songs. And I never thought about it. I mean, that's really ultimately what I thought about when I first got into music, you know, was being a rock star. But I never thought about really, I didn't know how to go about doing it. And he was the first guy that had this plan to really do it. So, you know, that was the difference between this band and all my previous bands.
That's insane. So you saw from the get go, this guy had he had sort of a business strategy, a marketing strategy for the entire enterprise, essentially.
Yeah, well, he had the songwriting abilities really and the ideas. And you know, right off the bat, we started work on original songs before we even learned. We had to learn cover songs in the early days to get gigs, but the first couple songs we worked on were some of his songs. So yeah.
Insane. And so you trusted in him. Were you more trusting? How did you feel about coming into it? Were you like, let's make it happen? Were you all about it? Were you, you know, how did that feel? Because like you said, you were doing covers, you were in other groups at the time, but something about this seemed like this, we might have something here.
Yeah, it was interesting you bring that up because when the other guitar player involved, Ronnie Unkins, he's the one that approached me about checking the band out. And when he first approached me with it, I was auditioning for the band that he had just left, which was an established band in the area. And he says, oh yeah, me and Donnie are starting this band and we're going to do originals and get a record deal. And you know, you would think that would be like, oh wow. But I was like, oh, do I want to start from scratch with this new thing, or do I want to just jump into this band that's already working? So that was like, I had to struggle with that one first. And then the drummer at the time actually called me later and talked my ear off and taught me to at least try it out and see what you think. So once we got together and I actually played with them, then that's when I finally went, okay, this might be kind of cool.
Was that something? Were you able to offer some originals from your end? What was it like from scratch for you getting into it? So you said, "Okay, we're gonna do this." What was that like for the origination of all your guys' hits? Don't close your eyes. All this stuff. You know, this is the beginning of it all. What was that like for you guys?
It was interesting because, throughout the years of playing around and going to see other bands at clubs and stuff, you would see a cover band playing all the hits of the day. And then they would announce, okay, here's one of our originals. And it would always be the worst song of the night, you know.
Yep.
But with Donnie's songs, the songs that he brought to the band, they were great. It was like, man, this is, it was just as good as all the other songs. So, even from the beginning, they were a little bit more raw at the beginning, because it took years to develop to what we became, but you could still tell right off the bat that it was going to be good.
How far along until then did you guys get picked up by? It was Atlantic, right? You got picked up by Atlantic. How far along until then did you guys get that deal?
Well, we started, it was one rehearsal in 1977. It was right at the end of the year. And then, so we didn't really officially get going until 78, but we got our record deal in 1981. But it took a while because it was just four of us to begin with. And then we went through three different singers before we found Steve Whiteman. And we had a different drummer until we got Jimmy. So it wasn't the original group. Like the lineup for KIX kind of came together in probably early 79. So from that point, it was only a couple of years, 79, 80, and then 81, we got signed.
And in the middle of that, you guys are changing members, adding members. It's all happening at once. What did that feel like for you at that age? Like you're a young guy, you're making it in the music industry, and you're like, this is we have guys coming in, coming out. We're on Atlantic. Who was on Atlantic at that time? Like you guys were up there with a lot of people.
Yeah, that was I mean, because that was early, 81. That was before the whole like LA metal scene was happening. Um, so Atlantic had like Phil Collins and well, they did still had like Led Zeppelin and AC/DC were on that label. So there were a lot of really cool bands. And so when we finally got signed to Atlantic, it was like, wow, just seeing the label, growing up, seeing the Atlantic label spinning on the turntable, it was really cool to be on that label.
Was it as cool as it looks for everybody out there who wants to have a record label? I'm sure it's different today. I don't even know what they're doing today, but I don't even know then. But for you guys, was it a lot of, okay, we're going to send you guys out. We're going to have this much out there for you guys marketing? Or was it like, we need you guys to make an album next week? We needed it as if yesterday, and you guys are going to get replaced. Was it, what was that like being with Atlantic in 80, 81?
Well, yeah, it's funny because, yeah, most musicians, that's their dream is to get signed to a major label. And when we did, it was like, yeah, you feel like you finally made it. But then you realize, you go from being a big fish in a small pond to a little fish in a ocean. And really, Atlantic didn't know what to do with us. So they did throw us into the studio, but they didn't do a whole lot as far as promoting us or anything. They just sort of, which was surprising because we didn't sell a whole lot of records at first. And, we figured they would probably drop us, but they didn't. They kept on going. They kept letting us go, and they kept letting us do more records, and it was a long, slow development process. And we're lucky that they had the patience to wait for us.
They vouched for you guys. It sounds like they vouched for you, and even though they didn't necessarily hold your hand into many of these doors, they vouched for you guys, and they said, let it make it rip.
Yeah, I guess they must have seen something.
So moving forward after that, what was the first hit? What was the first, the one that really sent you guys out there with touring, that everything? What was the first one that really set it off?
Yeah, well, that didn't really happen. I mean, they released singles along the way, but really, we didn't start getting major airplay probably until our fourth record, till "Blow My Fuse." There were a couple songs that made it to the charts, but not, nothing crazy. But
You guys have some pretty big hits though, even today. Or would you say that those became cult hits, sort of what they call them, like the movies that never get the biggest box office numbers in, and then all of a sudden everybody years later is like, you got to watch this. This is the best.
yeah, I think our whole career kind of went like that. We were kind of underground, but we still had the following. So that, I think that's why it helped us later when we came back onto the scene. Those people were still there. But yeah, the as far as the hit songs, the first one that took off was "Cold Blood," and that took off with MTV. We had a video that it got on that request line. They had this request line back in the late '80s, and they had these certain rules. Like there was only a certain amount of time that the song could be on there, and ours made it across that time span. And then they ended up having to change the rules because they got so many requests for it after the fact that they had to extend that time. So ours was like had like the record for the longest running requested video at that time. So that was the song "Cold Blood," and that was even before "Don't Close Your Eyes."
Get out of town. That's insane. And was the video already out? A lot of your guys' videos are they're very dreamy, very erotic. Who was the creative director behind all of that creative aesthetic decision making?
Yeah, when it came time to do videos and stuff like that, Atlantic, they'd suggest a director, they hire, the whole team, the stylist and somebody to come up with the concept and all that stuff.
Nice, nice. Now, Brian, you were a part of this era that everybody to this day wishes they were in. They're still making movies about this stuff. They're making TV shows, the 80s, the 70s. You know, you lived through this stuff. You were like a, you're still playing music today. It's like it never left you. The fact that, it's like, this is a real deal stuff. Like, what kept you so real? Was it just being born in that era, or you guys just what was it like back then? Just music scene, and do you think music is ever gonna, at least rock and roll? I think hip hop and pop are in, maybe, a lot of this electronically made stuff. How is like music that we play by hand in groups? You think that will live on? Is that going to keep going? What is rock and roll going to have to do to either evolve? Well, I'd love to hear your insight on some of this.
Uh, yeah, it has changed a lot over the years. I mean, if you go back and listen to like early, because I came up through the '60s and '70s, and you go back and listen to like a vinyl record from like the early '70s, and there's just something organic about it. And now with all the technology, which in a way the technology really makes it easier, and a lot more people have the opportunity to do their own recordings at home and make them like high quality. But
Right.
you lose with the technology, you end up losing the organic feel. And there's just something about like well, here's a perfect example. I recently saw that Beatles documentary, Get Back.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah. I haven't caught it yet. You saw it.
man, that record, the songs on that record, including the song Get Back, and all those songs, they I remember my brother had that record when I was young, and I loved that record. I never realized that it was recorded live. That's a live record, and not in front of an audience. It's like there's parts of it that are recorded in the studio, and then there's parts that were on a rooftop where they just set up and played, and they recorded it, and that's what was on the record. And I never knew that until I saw the documentary, because it sounds so good that they could just be pulling that off live. But nowadays, it doesn't seem like a band can do that anymore. You're in the studio. Well, half the time you're not even in the same room. You're just sending files through emails, and people are just putting their own parts on this thing. It's like Frankenstein music, except that it's got it's in Pro Tools, so everything's like perfect, like all the timing. Like there's no, like the old days, there's tuning problems, there's tempo problems, but it all adds to the character of the music. And now it's like almost industrial, like sterile. It doesn't have the soul that it used to. I mean, some people can still capture that, and it's still possible to capture that, but a lot of the music is pretty formulated and sterile to me, my personal opinion.
You're right. You're right. And I've been in the studio with a lot of these guys, and it's true with the Pro Tools. You can get so perfect. You might play something in person one way. Once it comes in here, they bring stuff up, they perfect it. And then the drums, the bass, everything. It sounds like a computer made jingle almost.
Yeah, I know. I'm thinking of maybe there'll be a sort of a regression, and it'll people will want to go back to the old way of doing it for a little while, because I know vinyl is coming back. So maybe Well, I know that in the old days we used to record the tape, the 2-inch tape, and now to be able to do that, it's a lot more expensive because tape is hard to find. So there's always those kind of obstacles, but somebody will figure it out.
It's like photography, right? People love the film pictures, even though with the digital you can just shoot away and stuff.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So you think it's gonna make a comeback? You think it's gonna make some sort of regression? Something's gonna have to happen.
Well, it does that. It's sort of a reoccurring pattern anyway. Like, if you think about it, like Jack White is one guy that's sort of tried to bring back the raw kind of thing.
Yeah, right. He's doing some big stuff in Chicago, right? Is it Chicago that he's got a whole thing going on? Detroit.
I think he's from Detroit, I think. But now he lives down here in Nashville. So like everyone ends up here.
So he's in Nashville. I completely interrupted what you were going to say, but what is he doing out of Nashville?
He came down here at some point. He's got a studio and a little, I don't even know what it is, like a record shop kind of place downtown.
I think I saw a video maybe a couple years ago about that, and I thought that was so awesome. Jack White is what he's even recording it somehow to keep that archaic sound going, right? He's doing some interesting things. He's always seen playing these busted up instruments, isn't he? Isn't he the one that you'll see? He'll bring out the busted up guitar and still play the same thing.
Yeah, he's into the old vintage stuff, but yeah. In fact, I think his place downtown is like a museum for like. He's even got one of those old 50s or early 60s little sound booths where you can go in and record your own little record.
Oh wow, that's insane. So what's next, Brian? What's gonna happen next? You're in Nashville. You've been there for 3 years. KIX has resurfaced. It's making a big rush. You guys are getting requests to go out and play. I bet. Everybody loves the '80s. The '80s have never left. They're probably more popular than ever before. So it sounds like it's all a win-win for you guys right now.
Yeah, and it's a surprise because we like mid '90s we kind of took a hiatus and I hadn't seen those guys. Like that's when I moved to LA from the East Coast out to LA. And so I hadn't even talked to like Steve in 10 years. And then one day he calls me and we just started talking about maybe getting the band back together. It's kind of like the Blues Brothers or something. But we plan to do a couple shows just to see how it would go back in Baltimore, where everybody else is from. And it was just going to be like just for fun and make a little money and just see how it goes. And from that there was a couple shows. This was at the end of 2003. We did a couple shows. It went so well. I mean, we sold out immediately. So we booked another cluster of shows the following September. And all those sold out. So we did another like holiday group of shows in 2004. So from there, it just sort of it expanded. And at some point, we picked up a new booking agent, and then he started booking us on festivals. And yeah, and it just has taken back off again. And we kept thinking, we didn't know how long that was going to last. We thought maybe a few years, and then people get tired of it, but it has not. Nobody's gotten tired of it. It's gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. And now they have the Monsters of Rock cruises and this and that. And it's like more festivals. And we're booked up through the end of this year. And we were booked up before the pandemic. 2020 was going to be a huge year. That got postponed. So now it's like, there's a lot of makeup dates involved, in addition to new shows coming up. So
you're busy. You guys are busy. You're booked.
Yeah,
that's awesome, man.
That's no shortage of gigs. I'll just put it that way.
That's insane. And so before you guys got together after your hiatus, you all got married, got jobs, did other stuff, and you did other things, and then everyone came together. I didn't see, did you guys get everybody, the whole group, back together? That seems like a hard thing to do. Everybody would go out places. Who was it? Everybody, half the guys?
Well, yeah, everybody except for the original bass player, who was the original songwriter too. But we all kept playing music during that time period. We all had our own little things going on. And then, in fact, that's when I ended up joining Rhino Bucket. But yeah, so when we got back together, it was everybody except the bass player. And we ended up using, that's when Mark Schenker joined the band. And he was the bass player in Steve's band at the time. So that's how that worked. And it wasn't that hard, really. I mean, everybody was kind of like, we were kind of starved for it at that point. So it was like, yeah, let's try it. It wasn't like we had to twist anybody's arms or anything.
That's insane. So you guys are booked. How about for Rhino Bucket? How are you allocating your time? Do they have an understanding that you're with KIX when you're with KIX? How you divide that with your time?
Well, yeah, that's always a challenge. Could be because I joined Rhino Bucket probably the year 2000. So between 2000 and when KIX started to get back together, I was pretty much full-time Rhino Bucket. And then once KIX got up and running, I had to sort of, allocate less and less time to Rhino Bucket. Now it's more like, well, the other thing with Rhino Bucket is that band is not on the same level as KIX. So there's no way that we would be able to sustain ourselves touring like KIX does, because we can't ask for as much money, and the gigs aren't there. So we just sort of do select shows. Like we'll go to Europe. Like January is a slow month for KIX. So Rhino Bucket will go to Europe during January, and in Europe, you can play 7 days a week. Like there's no, just like here in the States, it's more like weekends, but in Europe, it's like any day of the week, you can pack a club, especially Germany. So Rhino Bucket will go over there in January. We will do like the month worth of shows, just one day after the next, like hardly any days off. Then we'll come back and jump on like the Monsters of Rock cruise. So I'll do that it'll be Rhino Bucket and KIX. So we'll have those kind of gigs. Like we'll have the European thing, and then like the Monsters of Rock. There's another new one, the Monsters on the Mountain. So, that's kind of how I work the Rhino Bucket thing. And I'm sure those guys they get a little frustrated waiting around for me, but I gotta go. I got to keep the main money maker in place,
Hey man, we only have so much time on this planet, and you got to do what you got to do. You got to put your time where you see it reasonable to be put. You've put time into this group. This is a great group, and the fact that it's gaining this popularity, shouldn't have to leave them. But I don't know how many. A lot of people are now doing that, branching out. I think Josh Homme did it with Queens of the Stone Age. Dave Grohl does it, I think. Just talking about modern day guys. I mean, it's not like this is a KIX split up. It's not like a Pink Floyd thing where you have David Gilmour here and then Roger Waters there. This is a separate group, and the life of musicians is a very interesting one. I think for those listening, this is something that you're going to have to go through. You do one group, you do another, and then suddenly people say, hey, you're not, where'd you go? But a musician's, you're almost like an independent contractor in some ways. You got to go where you go and wherever it works.
Yeah. And, it's kind of cool for me personally because I have the KIX thing, which is, I've been doing this for so long, it's almost like second nature. And then the Rhino Bucket thing was like this fresh new thing, and it still kind of is like that. Like when I go off to do Rhino Bucket stuff, it's like this. It almost refreshes my whole guitar playing experience.
That's awesome. I was about to say the coolest part about it all is that you get to keep playing all, even just the more you're able to stay one with the instrument, so it's easier to play. It's like they say, anything you do in life, if you don't want to do it, you're not going to do it. But if you're out there going here, you're going creatively, you're changing directions. Yeah, it's all just brand new almost.
Yeah, and really, well, Rhino Bucket isn't really that far of a stretch from Kicks because we're both bands are heavily influenced by AC/DC, but Rhino Bucket's more. It's almost like a condensed. It's like condensed down to this core thing that's really kind of. It's fun to do. I enjoy it.
Now, what are you doing, Brian, to keep you the musician? How have you maintained yourself all these years as a musician to keep yourself as best, suited to keep playing your music? A lot of guys, whether it's a singer loses his voice, the guitarist loses a finger, he just doesn't play anymore. You're still going. What are you doing? Are you meditating? You eat healthy? If you guys don't follow him on Instagram, he's got a great selection of food that you guys can find. Are you guys making this stuff, or are these restaurants?
No, I love cooking. I cook all my own food. Well, I do go out to restaurants, but most of it's my own stuff. But yeah, as far as like staying current with my guitar playing, I'm not the most motivated guy sometimes. you know, I did put in a lot of work at the beginning when I was first learning. As a teenager, I didn't go out like most people in high school. I stayed home. I was in my room with my guitar and I put in a lot of work. So I think because of that, it's almost like it doesn't take much. It's almost like when you get into physical shape and then you lay off it for a while. When you jump back in, it comes back pretty quick. And that's sort of how my guitar playing is for me. It's like I can get lazy with it, but then if I really need to get ready for a gig, I just pick it up and play through some stuff, and all of a sudden it comes back. But I think also the fact that I play a lot, KIX is playing a lot. So I'm always playing. So that's just one way to keep up on stuff.
Absolutely. It sounds like it goes hand in hand for you. You might not be the most strict with this regimen and getting there and practicing, but you're out there so much playing that it's like you're already getting it. So that people have to understand that even if you're not, you're still in it and you're still part of that world, and it's just like it never really leaves. It lies dormant, and then once you need to wake the beast up, the beast comes out.
Right. And eating healthy doesn't help. I mean, doesn't help. Doesn't hurt. Sorry.
Have you have you always been a healthy eater? Have you had to change things up?
I used to think I was a healthy eater, but the more knowledge I obtain on nutrition and all that stuff, I look back at the way I used to eat and I'm like, oh man. But no, I haven't always been healthy. Like I struggled with the sweet tooth thing for a long time. I love cookies, cake, and all that junk. And especially on the road, you go out and like I'm a big diner fan. I love eating at diners. And they always have the big dessert case, and which was always tempting. So yeah, I wasn't always healthy, but I in the early 2000s, well, actually in 1998, I ended up getting sober, and I went through rehab and all that. And that kind of woke me up to my whole health thing. And I decided to get healthy. And one of the biggest influences was when KIX got back together, and I saw Steve for the first time in 10 years. And he looked like Iggy Pop, like a younger Iggy Pop, like just in shape. And I was like, wow, how'd you do that? And I was in my 40s at that point. So, when you get to that point, you got to start, you got to change things. You can't keep going the way you used to, because your body's going to not react the same. So Steve got me into the physical fitness part of it. And then from there, I started branching out and getting curious about the nutrition. And probably 4 years ago, 4, 5, maybe 5 years ago, I stumbled onto the whole like the keto thing. And then from there, I transitioned into the carnivore thing. So now I'm pretty much carnivore. Like every once in a while, I have some vegetables here or there, but it's mostly just animal based food, like meat and eggs and dairy, and that's pretty much it.
Strictly carnivore diet. As of how long now? How long has that been?
Well, I was sort of on and off carnivore keto the last year I was in LA. So when I moved here to Nashville, that's when I became like full-time carnivore. So that was March of 90 or 90, March of 2019.
March of 2019, you did you've implemented the so it's been about almost 2 years now, 3 years now, almost 3 years now, almost 3 years. Wow. And that showed significant change. I've heard, I think Jordan Peterson, the clinical psychologist, also, and his daughter, they do the carnivore diet, and they're the only others that I hear about doing that stuff. So I've heard that before.
Yeah, McKaylee Peterson. I heard her podcast, or actually, I heard Jordan talking about her and her ordeal with autoimmune stuff, and
Right.
that's why I started checking out the carnivore thing, was because of them.
Nice. And you got sober in '98,
Yeah,
right after KIX got back together, right? Right after you guys got your hiatus reignited.
or right in the middle.
Right in the middle.
Yeah, 'cause
Wow.
when I left the band and went out to LA, yeah, the wheels fell. It's like I kind of went crazy out there for a while. I mean, I was still playing music, but yeah, the whole, I mean, I don't know if you know much about alcoholism or drug addiction, but it's a progressive disease. And when I got to that point, it had progressed like crazy. So, yeah, by the end of the 1990s, I had it. Yeah, I had to deal with it.
Right. Yeah. You don't really have to deal with it until you have to deal with it. Right.
Well, I ended up in jail, so I had to deal with it.
That's good, Brian. Yeah, you've made it happen though. A lot of people aren't able to make that change, and you did. So good for you. Congratulations, and you've only made it better. Now you're changing things up with your physical regimen, and now with what you're putting into your body. So that's what we want in life: just consistent, gradual change. Right. Right. So.
Yeah, and here's the way I look at it too. It's like, the end of the 90s, they were horrendous, a horrible thing to go through. But the way I see it is like sometimes the worst thing that can happen to you turns out to be the best thing. And for me, that was the best thing: getting arrested and thrown in jail and all that junk. And it was like, I am so glad that happened, because it changed my life for the better, you know?
Right, because we're all sort of, you don't really know what's sort of lying dormant until you start throwing it. You start becoming a little scientist and giving yourself things to medicate, and suddenly you're medicating for the medication, and you're medicating for the medication of the medication. And you're just a scientist making an experiment up there. So it's So it was a pretty big crash and burn for you. You ended up locked up, and then for you, that was where you said, "We're done."
Yeah. In fact, I agreed. I agreed to go to rehab to get out of jail initially. I mean, that was my only motivation. But once I got there, I realized, you know what? It caused me to. Well, the whole process was magical, because I would never have planned it that way. But the fact that I was thrown in jail, I was only in there a little over 2 weeks, or maybe 15 days, I think, which isn't a whole long time. There's been people that have to spend years in jail, but that was long enough for me to actually get off the drugs, clear my mind, and then have that moment of clarity where I was like, like, what happened? Like, how, I'm thinking back in the 80s, playing arenas and all this stuff. And then here I am in jail. It's like, what happened? How did I get here? And, it took that for me to see that, and to open my eyes to that. And it's one of those things where, yeah, that horrific thing, it was a crash and burn. And you sometimes in life you need those to go through those times to really, and those times are necessary for you to have that realization and to become willing to change, because before that I didn't know, had no idea how to get out of the rut that I was in. So, I needed to be forced through that big lightning cloud or whatever that was that I went through.
That's an interesting way to put it. The cloud. How long was that rut for? Because it really is a rut. It ends up just being a big decade-long rut of what the heck,
Well, for me, luckily, it was like a 4-year thing. Before I left KIX, Ronnie, the other guitar player, he had gotten sober in '89, and him and I at that point I decided to stop drinking myself, and then him and I would room together on the road, and I wasn't in like the AA program or any of that stuff. Ronnie was, but I just decided to lay off. So I was like dry for the last 4.5 years of being in KIX. So I hadn't been drinking. So when I got to LA, that was the trick that my mind played on me, was that I figured, since I hadn't been drinking in all those years, that I was good now. Like, I'm good now, but I wasn't, because the disease had progressed to this stage that when I went back to it, it just kicked into overdrive. And so it was concentrated down to those last 4 years in the 90s. Like 94 through 97, or however many years that was. And
even after you were dry for that period of time, going back to it thinking, we're all good, it was like you never left. It was like back to
it was almost like, yeah, I'd never left. And it didn't start where I left off. It was like way beyond that when I went back to it. It was just like, boom.
You're making up for lost time and stuff.
Yeah. It's crazy.
Well, back to what I was saying though, you came out of it on the other end, and so you had some encouragement. You were rooming with Ronnie, and Ronnie was already on this trajectory. And then coming back to LA, it was like, no, Ronnie, we're in LA. This is the place where and wow.
Yeah, I was separated from my security blanket.
And you were tech for the most part. You were running solo. You weren't having to walk with children and a family to support, or were you supporting a family? How is it moving for you? You're a musician who's constantly touring, but once you bring a family into it, it can be a little tricky because you're carrying around more people with you. Was it for you, these moves? It was just you? Was it?
Yeah, luckily, I mean, that's probably one of the regrets I'll have on my deathbed. Is that I didn't have a family. I never had kids, but yeah, I was pretty much solo. I was on my own. I think that's why it's easier for me to sort of navigate through the whole touring thing, because the other guys have families, and it is a challenge, because especially not only time wise, but financially, it's a challenge to have to juggle those two worlds. For me, it's like, well, I have a cat. Does that count? Anyway, well, I used to have a dog too, but back then, yeah, now I'm down to a cat. But so sometimes when I leave home, I think about my cat. But other than that, it's like, yeah, I can just sort of take off and just go wherever I need to go, not have to worry about anything.
Hey, that's not very different from many people, and you do it how you want, and that's very fine. I have lots of friends who same thing. Work, business is a baby in many ways. Your career is a baby, a family. So it's like you gotta you got to take and choose what you want to take and choose. But you're out here, you're in Nashville, so it's exciting, Brian. I'm really excited to catch up with you and just see what happens with KIX and with Rhino Bucket. I want to know more about what's happening. You say you're booked for the year. So we're in March right now. You guys probably planning for big summer release maybe, or you guys have some stuff lined up right now?
As far as well, it's mostly just shows. We don't have any recording stuff planned. I mean, we put out a record. It's weird because back in the old days, our last record was 94, and then we didn't record a new record until, what was it, 2014? And then they're like, well, when are you going to do another one? But we're not in a hurry. I mean, we're not even on a record label right now, so there's not really any plans to record anytime soon. But Rhino Bucket, I've been recording with pretty steadily since I joined them, and they're talking about maybe trying to squeeze out another new record this year. But we'll see if I have the time. Hopefully, I'll find the time to do that. But
he's a busy guy, you guys. Well, Brian, it's been a great pleasure, Brian. It's been awesome to hear about your journey, your story. I think the audience is going to love this. For those of you that know KIX, for those of you that know Rhino Bucket, or for those of you that are just discovering Brian, here he is, you guys. Brian, what's your advice to musicians out there who, either are just starting, have been at it for a couple of years, maybe they're on a hiatus? What's your advice to the guys out there making music and just want to keep that spirit alive?
Well, I would say the main thing is never give up. I mean, if this is your dream, just go for it. I mean, I pretty much set up my life to do this, and I had nothing to fall back on. So this is it. but yeah, that would be the main thing, is don't give up. And then the other thing is, stick to your own thing. Like, don't follow the trends. Like, do what feels right for you, and let the people follow you.
Very interesting. Very nice. All right, you guys. Brian Forsythe. Thanks a lot, Brian.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.